Chapter 15. The worst part about being a prisoner, Alice thought, was not knowing what was going on. She had watched McHaddish and his party arrive after Keren had been summoned by Buttle's messenger. Her window commanded a view of the courtyard and the main gate by which they entered. But once they were ushered into the keep, she was left in a fever of curiosity. What were they discussing? What were their plans? How would Will counter them? Did he even know the Scotty were here? As a courier, she was accustomed to being privy to confidential information. Her enforced inactivity and her ignorance of what was happening gnawed away at her, sending her pacing helplessly about the circular room. Looking for something to distract her, she knelt to inspect the two centre bars in the window. In recent days, she had begun to work on the bars with the remaining acid. Each time Keren came to see her, she waited half an hour after he had left, then poured the acid into the shallow well around the base of the two bars. She used only a little at a time, as the action of the acid on the iron created pungent fumes that took at least an hour to disperse. This was the reason why she would only work on the bars after Keren had visited her. She reasoned that there was little prospect of his returning on those occasions. As the acid ate away at the iron and the mortar, she concealed the missing material with a mixture of soap, dirt, and rust. She gouged the soft material away now with her spoon, piling it carefully to one side for reuse. The bars were 3/4 eaten away, she saw. Another 2 or 3 applications should see the job complete, and there was plenty of acid left to do the job. She wasn't totally sure what she would do once the bars were eaten away. After all, she was still terrified of heights and paralyzed by the thought of descending the outer wall. But it didn't hurt to be prepared. Perhaps, she thought, she could risk another application now. Keren was tied up with the Scotty general, and the odds were he wouldn't come to see her again. But she resisted the temptation. For all she knew, Keren might want to parade her in front of McHaddish. Reluctantly, she replaced the soap, dirt, and rust paste, concealing the gap in the iron. Then, to put temptation behind her, she moved away from the window, stretching out on the bed, fingers laced behind her head. She didn't sleep. Her thoughts whirled through her head, spurred by her own sense of inactivity and frustration. The hours dragged by. She paced the room again, lay on the bed again, rearranged the furniture. 1 table, 2 chairs, 1 bed. That didn't take long. She considered moving the wardrobe, but decided it was too heavy. Besides, the noise might bring the sentries in to see what she was doing, and she had no wish to see them. She inspected the iron bars once more. At one stage, she examined the little bottle of acid, which she had returned to its hiding place on top of the window lintel. She shook it to see how much acid remained. Then, taking control of herself, she put it away. She was lying on the rearranged bed when she heard orders being shouted from the courtyard. She rose hurriedly and moved to the window. The Scotty party was leaving. That was quick, she muttered. McHaddish had been here less than 6 hours. Either the talks with Keren had been totally successful, or absolutely the reverse. From the way the two men shook hands, with Keren clapping his free left hand on the Scotty's shoulder, she assumed it was the former. She glanced at the sky. The light was fading fast, and she hoped Will could see what was going on. She'd have to send him a signal later tonight. She knew that even when he wasn't watching the castle, he left someone in the trees who would note down the light patterns she sent so Will could decipher them later. The drawbridge rumbled and the portcullis creaked again as the way opened for the Scotty to leave. She watched them for a few minutes as they jogged through the knee-high gorse, angling back to the north and to the path that led to the Picton border. Then the bulk of the northeast tower hid them from view, and she moved away from the window. The wind had shifted, and it was sending its icy breath into the open window, setting the small fire in the grate alternately flaring and dying away. She released the draw cord and allowed the heavy tapestry to fall across the window, blocking most of the draught. The sudden darkness of the room depressed her, and she lit the small lamp. Half an hour later, she heard the key in the lock, and Keren entered. She expected him to be triumphant and boasting now that his plan was well advanced. But he seemed depressed somehow and distracted. She quizzed him about Macaddash, but he angrily diverted her questions. He didn't want to discuss the Scotty general. Instead, he talked about his childhood, growing up in the north, hunting in the summer and spring, exploring the forest and streams, remaining locked inside for most of the snowbound winters. He asked her about her own childhood, and she told him briefly about the ward at Redmont, where Baron Arold raised the orphaned children of those who died in his service. Yet, as they talked, she sensed that there was something he was not talking about, not wanting to face. Then she realized what it was. Instead of feeling triumph that his plan was working, Keren was feeling regret. Regret at the fact that he was now committed irrevocably to a path that would take him away from all that he knew and had held dear for years. A path from which there was no return. Her evening meal arrived, and he excused himself abruptly. Alice sat at the table thoughtfully, looking at the bowl of stew before her. Things were coming to a head, she realized, perhaps faster than she had expected. Once the servant had come for the tray, she thought, she'd start work on the bars again.